Virgo, 2 sentences. That is what this person has been building toward. Not a speech, not a carefully constructed argument for why things should be different or why what happened was understandable or why both sentences could be true simultaneously. Just these two. The specific, stripped down, nowhere to hide quality of 2 sentences that contain everything that has been sitting in them, unspoken, for however long the silence has been the arrangement between you. The first sentence is the acknowledgement. The second sentence is the truth underneath everything. And the space between them, the breath between the apology and the declaration, is where the entirety of what has been unresolved is finally being allowed to exist out loud. They have been rehearsing this moment in the specific daily unconscious way that people rehearse things they know they are going to have to say when they have not yet found the form for saying them, running through versions, finding each version insufficient, returning to the 2 sentences, because the 2 sentences are the ones that carry the actual weight without being dressed in language that reduces them. Just the two. I want to begin with the first sentence because the apology is not a preamble. It is not the social obligation that must be discharged before the declaration can be made. It is its own full, heavy, separately important thing that deserves its own full examination before we go anywhere near what follows it. I'm sorry for everything I put you through. Everything. That word is doing a lot of work, and I want to give it the acknowledgement it deserves. Not everything as a general, imprecise gesture toward the fact that some things went wrong. Everything as the specific, honest. I have been looking at the full list accounting of someone who has done the actual work of reviewing what happened between you through a lens that is not protective of themselves. This is not an apology offered from a position of not fully knowing what they are apologizing for. This person knows. They have been living with the knowing, with the specific, daily, shows up, uninvited quality of the memories of things they said and things they did and things they chose not to do and things they chose not to say that produced specific, real, should not have happened costs for you. The everything is not vague. The everything has a list attached to it. A list they cannot escape and have stopped trying to. Let me describe what the process of arriving at this apology has actually looked like. Because apologies of this quality, the ones that use the word everything and mean it, are not produced quickly. They are the result of a process, a specific, often painful, entirely interior process of sustained examination that takes as long as it takes and cannot be rushed. At some point they stop defending themselves, not to you, to themselves, in the private courtroom of their own interior where they had been for a significant period of time, presenting the case for why what happened was understandable, why the circumstances contributed, why both people played a role, why the specifically painful things they did were not quite as bad in full context as they appeared in isolation. The case ran out, not because the circumstances and the context were not real, but because at a certain point, the evidence on the other side became impossible to continue arguing against, because they could no longer construct a version of events in which their specific choices and their specific failures did not produce specific, real, entirely avoidable pain for someone who did not deserve that pain. The defense rested, and what followed the defense resting was not peace. It was the full, unmediated, no longer deflected weight of what they actually did. That weight is what produced the apology, not guilt performed for the purpose of producing a particular response from you. The actual weight of actual accountability for actual choices with actual consequences. The apology comes from that place. And now the second sentence. You are the only person I've ever loved. I want to give this the same honest, unhurried examination as the first sentence because it carries a different kind of weight and it deserves its own space rather than being absorbed into the emotional context of the apology that precedes it. The only, that word in that sentence, spoken by someone who is not speaking casually. The only is not a superlative used for emphasis. It is not the emotional inflation that happens in moments of feeling when people use absolute language to convey intensity rather than literal truth. It is the specific, literal, soberly considered, having thought carefully about whether this is actually true conclusion that this person has arrived at after doing the specific, slightly uncomfortable work of examining their own experience honestly. They have been in love before, or what they understood as love at the time, or what had the features of love in the available vocabulary of whatever age and whatever experience they were operating from. But looking back at those experiences from the specific vantage point of having felt what they feel for you, something has shifted in how those earlier experiences are categorized. They do not feel like the same thing. They feel like approximations, like the earlier, less complete versions of something that has finally arrived in its full form, like the practice that prepared them for something they did not yet know was coming. You are the full form. The only, you are the full form. The only, I want to stay with this for a moment because the specific quality of arriving at the only through honest comparison rather than through emotional inflation is worth naming. Most people who say you are the only person I have ever loved are not doing the work of comparison. They are reaching for language that conveys intensity. They are using absolute terms to describe the size of what they feel in the moment, not the result of having carefully examined the full history of what they have felt for others and concluded that this is categorically different. This person is doing the second thing. They have examined, they have looked honestly at every prior relationship or feeling or connection that carried the vocabulary of love, and they have put it next to what they feel for you, and they have encountered a difference that is not one of degree, but of kind. Not that the prior things were smaller versions of the same feeling, but that the feeling they have for you is a different thing from the prior feelings entirely, that it operates by different rules, that it has a different quality of presence in them, that it produces different things in their interior and a different quality of response to the ordinary circumstances of daily life. And the conclusion of that honest comparison is the only, not said to produce a particular effect in you, said because it is what the examination produced. Let me speak to what this declaration cost them, because the only is not said lightly by someone who is being careful about the truth. And this person is being careful about the truth in a way that makes the saying of it considerably more costly than it would be if they were simply reaching for emotional language in a charged moment. The only requires them to say something about themselves. It requires them to admit that the feeling they have for you exceeds anything that preceded it. And in that admission is the specific, uncomfortable acknowledgement that what they have had with others, whatever those relationships were and however significant they felt in their time, was not this, that the standard has changed, that what they now understand love to be, having experienced what they feel for you, is something they did not understand before. That is a particular kind of vulnerability. Not simply the vulnerability of saying I love you, the vulnerability of saying no one has made me feel this before, of making a comparison that places every prior relationship in a different category than the current one, of admitting that the thing they most want is also the thing that has shown them the clearest possible picture of everything they were settling for before. They are saying all of that with the only, in 2 words, I want to speak to something that I think is the heart of this reading, the thing that connects the apology and the declaration in a way that makes them more than the sum of their parts. The apology makes the declaration honest without the apology preceding it. The I've ever loved would carry a different quality, would have the specific, slightly suspect quality of a declaration made in the service of a desired outcome, of love as a card being played toward a particular result, of feeling weaponized as a means toward an end. The apology changes that, because you cannot apologize for everything you put someone through and then declare love in the same breath without the two things being in conversation with each other, without the love being implicated in the apology, without the apology acknowledging that loving someone and hurting them through your choices are things that can coexist, and that coexisting does not excuse the hurting. This person is saying, I loved you and I hurt you. Both true, without using the love to diminish the hurt. That is the most honest version of this thing, the most uncommon version, the version that does not require the hurt to be minimized in order for the love to be expressed. Both get their full weight in both sentences. This person is saying, I loved you and I hurt you. Both true, without using the love to diminish the hurt. That is the most honest version of this thing, the most uncommon version, the version that does not require the hurt to be minimized in order for the love to be expressed. Both get their full weight in both sentences. I want to describe how rare this actually is, because I think the rarity of it is worth naming before it is received. Most apologies that are followed by declarations of love use the declaration to reframe the apology, to place the hurting in the context of the loving in a way that shifts its weight, that says, yes, I hurt you, but look at how I feel, which repositions the love as the more important truth and the hurt as the understandable cost of navigating a feeling this large. That is not what is happening here. Here, the apology is complete before the declaration begins. The hurt gets its full acknowledgement without the immediate introduction of the mitigating love. The apology stands alone with the specific, sober quality of someone who is willing to be fully accountable for what they did before they offer anything in return for that accountability. And then, only then, the love, not as mitigation, as a separate truth that exists alongside the accountability rather than explaining it away. 2 full sentences, 2 full truths, neither diminishing the other. Tell me in the comments if this reading is reaching the right person. If these 2 sentences, spoken in whatever form they arrive, are ones you have been waiting to hear from someone specific, or if you have already heard some version of them and you are sitting with what they mean, tell me where you are with this. I want to speak to what you do with these 2 sentences when they arrive, because they are coming in some form, and the quality of how you receive them will matter for what comes after. You are not obligated to receive them as resolution. I want to say that clearly before anything else, because the emotional weight of these two sentences together, especially if they arrive in a moment when you are not fully prepared for them, can have the quality of resolution before any resolution has actually been produced. The apology is real. The declaration is real. Neither of them, alone or together, changes anything about the practical reality of whatever the situation between you currently is. They do not undo the things that the everything refers to. They do not automatically create the conditions for trust to be rebuilt, or the dynamic to be different, or the future to look meaningfully different from the past that produced the need for the apology. They are the beginning of a different chapter, not the chapter itself. The beginning is significant. The beginning matters. The willingness to say both things honestly and with the full weight of what they actually mean is meaningful evidence of a specific quality of reckoning that is not always available. But the chapter that follows from the beginning is written in behavior. Over time, in the specific demonstrated cannot be faked quality of someone whose choices are different from the choices that produced the everything. Receive the two sentences as what they are, a beginning and a real one. Receive the two sentences as what they are, a beginning and a real one. I want to add something to this because I think it is the most practically useful thing in the reading. The real beginning looks different from a performed beginning. A performed beginning arrives with a quality of trying to make you feel something, of deploying the apology and the declaration in the specific sequence and with the specific emotional framing that is calculated to produce a particular response, of watching carefully to see whether the response is what was hoped for and adjusting the presentation accordingly. What I am reading does not have that quality. What I am reading has the quality of someone who has finally stopped performing anything at all in relation to you, who has exhausted the energy required for performance, who has arrived at a point where the only available authentic move is the one that says what is actually true without the cushioning of management or strategy. You will be able to feel the difference. The absence of performance has a specific, recognizable quality to someone who has the sensitivity and the intelligence to notice it, a kind of directness that is slightly uncomfortable in its completeness, a quality of, I have no more angles from which to approach this, only the thing itself. That quality is how you know the beginning is real. Let me speak to something about the only that I think is the most important piece of this entire reading. Being someone's only is not a burden. I want to name that directly because there is a version of receiving this that collapses under the weight of it. That hears the only and feels the pressure of being the singular reference point for another person's experience of love, that converts the declaration into an obligation rather than into what it actually is. What it actually is testimony, a specific, honest, soberly considered account of the person giving it, of what their experience of love has been and where it has been most fully present, and what comparison they have available when they look at the full range of what they have felt for people and at what they feel for you. It is testimony about their interior, not a claim on yours. What you feel, what you want, what you decide to do with both the apology and the declaration belongs entirely to you and is not determined by the weight of the only, by the significance of being someone's only, by the specific, considerable privilege and responsibility of being the person who has finally shown someone what love of this quality feels like. You get to feel what you actually feel. You get to want what you actually want. And you get to decide what the two sentences mean for what comes next on whatever timeline your own interior actually needs. Not the timeline that the intensity of what they have expressed would prefer yours. As we close, I want to give you the full image. Someone sitting with two sentences, not written down, in their chest, where they have been living for the period of time during which saying them was not yet something they had arrived at the readiness for, where they have been accumulating the weight that makes two short sentences the heaviest possible thing to say. And the decision, the specific, quiet, this is what I have to do decision that produced the moment of saying them. Not the decision to produce a particular response in you, the decision to finally be honest, to stop managing the apology and the declaration into something more bearable, to carry privately, to give them to the person they belong to you. In whatever form they are about to arrive, they are coming with everything that produced them, with the full weight of the only. And you, Virgo, are going to know what to do with them because you always know, even before you let yourself know that you know. And that knowing, Virgo, is the most reliable thing available to you in this moment. Trust it. Whatever it says,